All right, it's 7:01. I'll call the meeting to order. And I'll start by taking roll. Marlene.
Here.
Zach.
Here.
Andrew E. David Luke. Present. Nicholas Lee. I think he might be joining because he was asking me for stuff this afternoon, so we're corresponding, I should say. Brenda Spears.
Here.
Katie Bell.
Here.
Tim Motley.
Online.
And Chris Bovak, I am here. Andrew Myers.
Here.
Brad Book. But he wasn't going to make it, I think. So we want to see him. And then Ryan Olson. Here. Okay. With that, move into the meeting. Did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting? Any objections to approving them?
We had 2 sets of minutes. So you had minutes from your February joint meeting with the environmental board, and then you had your minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, well, let's, the minutes from our last regular meeting. Any objections? So those are hereby approved. And then from the joint meeting, any objections to those? So those are approved. With that, we will move into public comments. Do we have Connie, right? Do we have anybody else?
I think just one.
Right. And Nicholas Lee is.
Hello there. Sorry for being a little late.
No worries. Okay. So public comment from, we have one speaker.
Yep. Let me just unmute you, Connie. Hey, Connie, you should be here.
And hearing.
You able to do your video, Connie, or give us any indication if you're hearing us? Disconnect.
She might have just dropped. Maybe.
Yeah, it looks like she dropped. She might be calling back in.
We can wait a minute. We don't have anybody else.
We don't have anybody else. We did receive comments from her by email, which you all received, and I can include in the minutes. And we'll see if she's able to rejoin, but we didn't have any other further public comments.
Well, what we could do is move into regular business, which is the first item is the Heritage Tree Program and Urban Forest Team update presented by Dan Hintz. I suspect Connie's comments will relate to that, so maybe she'll jump in after that.
That's what our email comments were. That's a great idea.
Take it away.
Okay.
Well, Asanti's getting the slides up. I think I've met everyone and presented to this group a couple times now, but Dan Hintz, Urban Forest Supervisor with the City of Issaquah. Been in this role over a little over a year now, and kind of have 2 parts for my agenda items today. Kind of refreshing where we're at with our Heritage Tree Program and talking about some kind of nomination process updates and some discussion questions to hopefully really pin that down and bring that back to the board in the next couple months for a vote to actually move forward with those updates. That's the goal, at least. So we'll kind of dive into that here in just a minute, and then we'll have some updates on the urban forest program over the last year since we've really kind of built this out and continue to grow. So We will stop in the middle for the discussion questions as we get through the heritage tree slides. So if you have anything before then, feel free to raise your hand. But just to be clear, we'll stop on those slides with the 4 or 5 questions we had proposed for you all coming into tonight. So essentially we'll do a quick review of heritage tree programs. I guess that could be plural. Kind of what those look like across our region. Kind of talk about this draft process of how heritage trees are nominated and ultimately selected in Issaquah, and some of those proposed updates. And then we have our discussion questions. So that'll really be the focus to start. And so we'll pause there after item number 4 for discussion, and then mostly just updates from the urban forest team after that, but certainly open to questions, comments you all may have on some of the work we're doing with our team. Okay, so this is just kind of our cover slide, but this is a few of our trees at the Hillside Cemetery there. No worries, just figured I'd kind of point out where those pictures are from. You've seen a couple of these slides when we initially brought this to the park board back in the fall. So this, like I said early on, is kind of a little bit more of a refresher. But yeah, heritage tree programs are pretty common in cities around the nation, really meant to recognize the significance of trees to the community, and we'll kind of get into those different categories for that here in just a moment. Recognize, celebrate, educate about unique trees. Should also just be clear to point out too, we do have added protections for our existing heritage trees, and we can chat about that a little bit more too. So really kind of balancing all of those things in our program, recognition, celebration, and then also the added protection that status brings for those trees. Here specifically in Issaquah, our program was launched by the park board in 2005. So we're almost 20 years into this, but has been fairly dormant the last, almost 10 years or so. And we really focus on, trees that reflect the character of Issaquah. So the next slide will have a little bit more on those categories. So yeah, there's the last tree, actually a little over 10 years, I should say, that was nominated and selected in 2012. So this is what's a bit out of date and needs some refreshing, partly because this is still a paper nomination form. So very obvious things like getting some electronic or online submittal for nomination set up too. But you can kind of see it's a pretty basic form with the name of the property owner, person nominating if different with the property owner, needing a signature from the landowner there at the bottom, and then kind of brief description of the characteristics, that are really meriting that nomination. So that could come from individual citizens, that can come from city staff, that can certainly come from park board members. But kind of the main thing there is that approval from the landowner there. So you can see in the past, these were generally reviewed on September 1st, and we'll talk a little bit about it, trying to expand that time frame out both for outreach, information gathering, and decision making. Definitely based on some feedback from you all the first time we met about how it sounds like in the past. Not sure how many of you were on the board. I think this was maybe Brad a little bit more. Was kind of discussing how it would kind of come in fast. Decisions were kind of made fast, and there wasn't time for a whole lot of context or understanding about some of those individual trees that were being nominated. So it is reviewed by the park board once those nominations come in. If approved, the name of the nominator and the property owner will be acknowledged in a proclamation by the mayor at a city council meeting. So those steps will remain somewhat similar. So this is where there's definitely a couple things missing from this flow chart, but this is general kind of process that we are kind of hoping to build out on an annual basis. I really think it would be neat to use our Spring Arbor Day, which we usually celebrate in the beginning of April, to kind of really launch, this program annually and kind of bring some renewed recognition to the fact that we have this heritage tree program, and trying to get some more of that public engagement. So really using that as kind of a launching point for program outreach, having a request to have nomination forms submitted by June. So I think this would be different from before, where those would kind of come in right up till September 1st. So we're kind of looking at a 2 to 3 month window to really try to publicize. I think honestly, this time of year is our best time of year for trees. Everything's so green, lush, flowering. It's a really good time for photos and celebration of all our different trees here in Issaquah. Those nominations would be reviewed initially by me or the person in the urban forest supervisor role. So that's something that we just want to be clear about too, whether those are trees nominated on public land or private. Then this is what we kind of talked about was maybe missing a little bit before, but essentially what I'm kind of looking at is a at most 1-page memo that is kind of looking at both the kind of health assessment of these trees. We obviously want to nominate trees that have at least some longevity and staying power. We've already lost a couple heritage trees that were nominated in the early 2000s that have come down in storms or died just from old age essentially. And also, as we kind of talked about too, having a kind of assessment on, the location and the fit in the landscape with those trees, from any other kind of plans and, competing needs in those areas. So this is where, it does come in to be clear, this is something we talked about last time, but through the update of Title 18, heritage trees are now essentially have an added protection from development and redevelopment. They're pretty similar in terms of just basic tree removal. They can be removed if they're deemed a hazard tree, if there's like an imminent risk to people or property. That is still a route to potentially remove a hazard tree, but that's the big difference from other trees is this protection from development, redevelopment. So that's where we just want to be really certain about the longevity of these trees. Kind of right tree in the right place. And then, also getting into like, hey, are there different, this will be on the next slide, kind of different categories or levels of nomination in certain areas we might be still kind of figuring out that, competing needs potentially with the location certain trees might be at. So essentially those memos would be developed by me consulting with other city staff as it relates to public trees, working with private landowners as well, just to really make sure they're understanding of, the requirements of the program and what designation means. And then, it would kind of be sent through to the park director just kind of for approval might be the kind of not the exact word at that process. It's not designation necessarily, but just kind of as a final review of those steps for, essentially the recommendation to nominate and move forward with these trees to the park board. At the same time, obviously we'd be notifying private nominations as well that, these are moving forward and kind of what the steps are for review and potential selection by the park board. So that's what that little blue bubble is off to the side, trying to kind of track both the public process in green and some of the slightly different steps that would be required for trees on private property. So the idea is that, we would be bringing a lot more information. You would have a lot more kind of review amongst our team and my position as urban forest supervisor, and then still be bringing this to the park board in September. Some questions to certainly talk through is, number of nominations. You can see right there, our current program states 3 trees per year. We talked about that briefly, if there would be a reason to bump that up a little bit, especially since this program has been dormant. I think that's definitely something we want to discuss with you all here in a couple minutes. And then, really bringing that to the board in September to kind of review and help us select and, ultimately nominate those 3 or however many trees we settle on. So, my thought is with these tree assessments, you would also touch on our categories, which thought we had that slide. It's not that slide's next. So actually let's hop to that one. We might hop back to this one for a second. But with that, just kind of basic tree health assessment, location, kind of review. How does it fit these categories? And I'll admit we've tried to look a lot into specific criteria because that was some of the interest last time we met. Is like how do we have kind of clear definitions on heritage trees? I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but it is one of those things that's a little bit subjective. Most of these programs. I found a little bit out there from City of Seattle where there's some percentage size comparisons to some of the, same species, biggest specimens in the state. There's little things like that that could potentially work for specimen, but historic and, kind of cultural significance in history is a little bit subjective. And this is where I do want to also make kind of a little add-on that we have been working really closely with the Snoqualmie tribe and their new tribal forester, Elizabeth Walker, on how we include maybe not just culturally modified trees, which we talked about, trees that have been modified historically by indigenous people, but maybe even just that broader cultural significance for, both the early European migrants and, the tribes that have been living here since time immemorial. So that is something that's definitely going to get included in historic that was missing. There's still stuff that we need to kind of work out on the tribes end in terms of how they want those trees potentially publicized, mapped, all those sort of things. There might be a little bit more I guess privacy around that and lack of, specific locations, but maybe some more general information on the type of trees and that cultural significance to tribes like the Snoqualmie. So essentially, kind of get a little off track there, but making sure that we're tying back to one or maybe multiple of these nomination categories for specimen, kind of historic, cultural significance, and ecological value. I do think an area we could potentially add to this too is kind of aesthetics come into this commonly in programs. We don't have that called out, but other than that, I would say for the most part, these three categories are pretty comparable to what other cities are doing for their heritage tree programs. So do you mind going back to the flow chart just real quick to kind of finish that out? So just want to be clear that there would be some kind of, as objective as possible kind of guidance on, why these trees, whoever's nominating them is supposed to kind of provide that. But as I'm kind of reviewing them too, can kind of add to that or, highlight that into these memos that would go to the park board. And essentially, in the September meeting, the park board would be voting to move forward or to deny these trees, hopefully with more information than has been provided in the past. And assuming we're moving forward with 3 or whatever number we settle on, that heritage tree status is awarded, as mentioned earlier, at a city council meeting with a mayoral declaration too. So this is where there's a lot more to do at the end of this. How do we publicize this? How do we map this? How do we provide more engaging information and opportunities to learn about these trees? Talks around small QR codes, signage, things like that. All great conversations and open to some conversations on that tonight, but I think we are really trying to hammer down the kind of points to get us to getting more trees into this program, and then really getting more creative about what program outreach and kind of visibility looks like. So that's kind of where that last kind of public facing part comes in there before starting the process over again the following year around Arbor Day. So really looking at this as a program for a good chunk of our year to be celebrating, recruiting, educating, and hopefully adding to our heritage tree inventory. So yeah, can skip ahead one more. So really, these are some of the discussion questions we are hoping to hear from you all tonight. We tried to give what are very common kind of primary reasons or goals for a heritage tree program, but would love to hear kind of more personally what resonates with you the most on why this program is, useful, necessary, important here at Issaquah. Kind of going back to what we talked about, does this give, this process enough time and information to make informed decisions as a park board? I can try to provide more details, or please, if there's more requests on things you would like to see throughout those kind of summer months as the nominations come in and then ultimately get reviewed and sent to the park board. Additional information you're looking for to determine if trees should be selected. Like I said, there's not necessarily cut and dry criteria, but if there's things that you would like to weigh over other things, this is a good time to kind of discuss that. And then, how do we factor in that kind of location and context that the tree is in as well? Suggestions for promotion, and I would say this is both, a little less for established heritage trees, like I kind of mentioned right on the last slide, but also how do we just get this program more out to the public and try to encourage participation, and whether that's nomination or, really helping us kind of generate some good candidates for our program. And then this last one I think is really interesting too. What do multiple designation levels look like? What does it look like for a collection of trees, a grove of trees, kind of different designations there. And this is one that Connie sent over to the Puyallup, which has a fairly similar process where there's, a director approval, there's a memo from the city arborist, but they essentially have a 122 tree list of potential heritage trees. So it's almost could be heritage trees in waiting, but they don't have an official designation, and, trying to kind of figure out, is that something that we're looking to, kind of build out from the community and just get more awareness around trees that are, special for people here in Issaquah, and have a collection that can be kind of celebrated that way, and potentially have kind of a different name and status, for those too. So I think we're really trying to kind of figure out what some of those kind of different tiers and, still building recognition and letting people kind of celebrate the trees they love, knowing that there's still a finite number that we're gonna approve and move to the heritage tree status each year. So, along those lines too, any thoughts on, number of trees nominated, I think would be or essentially number of trees selected would be useful too. So I think I'll pause there and see if there's kind of initial thoughts, and we can kind of work through these question by question if that works. If you kind of have responses to both of them, I think that's okay too, or to multiple questions, I should say.
If I could just say thank, oh, Jeez.
Just check, I don't see her back on the meeting.
I was just gonna add, thank you, Dan, for just your work on this. As Dan said, we're really hoping tonight to not only, just provide this update, but really frame up discussion and get some feedback on some of these really important questions. And just also understanding to that latter point, something we've talked a lot at the staff level is there a way to create some designation levels where this program doesn't feel like such a hard and fast on-off switch? We have a lot of really cool and great trees to celebrate, but the context and the setting might be such that it's really hard to give it a full heritage designation. So, but how do we, again, just, craft a program that really does recognize, celebrate the value and importance of trees in this town. Anyone, please.
I have a question. So I like the idea of having multiple designation levels, but will these have the same protection status as a heritage tree, or will they have?
I don't think it's, at least not initially. I mean, that would have to be something we'd have to, codify and do, which would, keep in mind that my understanding is early on heritage trees didn't have that additional protection either. It really was just kind of a recognition, and there was a community push to include that. But I think to some extent, then that, maybe reduces the overall number of trees that, could be recognized. I think that's what we're talking about. Could there be a bigger pool that we still, kind of develop and, provide some information and, have maybe even some social media campaigns around or things like that, that could eventually become heritage trees for sure. But yeah, I don't think initially that is the goal for that.
Yeah, and an add on to that, Katie, that's a great question I mean, with one of the values of having multiple levels is understanding, probably coinciding with multiple levels of different levels, either protection or recognition, and understanding, hey, that's a valuable tree and a tree that we really want to pay close attention to, or we want to be careful of, but because of its location, there's multiple questions that still need to be answered to determine,
Nicholas, you've got your hand up. You want to go and then Zach?
Sure, yeah, maybe start a tidal wave here or follow on one. I just appreciate the presentation. And especially the insight or kind of the comprehensive analysis around some of our tribal partners and some other jurisdictions and kind of how this is being handled elsewhere. So I think it was great to distinguish, how Issaquah is doing it versus how other places are doing it. One of the things I remember Connie bringing up in her email, and it was a question that I have as well, just listening to you, is just to make sure I understood this. Is there a reason that we would limit the number per year, or is that something that we're moving forward? It seemed like we were trying to govern the amount of heritage trees that were being recognized in a given year, or did I miss the part where you said we're not doing that anymore because we can just, process them as they come independently? Or is there a reason we would limit that? I don't really understand that part.
Thanks, Nick. I can't speak to the original decision around that 20 or so years ago. I don't think any of us were necessarily a part of that. I do know, speaking of kind of that review of other cities, a lot of them do have some sort of cap potentially. Sometimes it's more than 3, definitely. And I think there's a strong argument to, think about increasing that. But if it's just fully open, I don't know. I have a hard time saying, and it's supposed to be a program that's, recognizing fairly unique trees. And, if we are adding 100 a year or something like that, at what point is there, kind of a limit where it kind of waters down the program, I guess, too. And that's where, like I said, not having real super clear cut and dry criteria is a little bit tough, because it's not like stuff in our land use code where, landmark trees, 30 inches diameter, there's things like that that are just real kind of cut and dry. That's generally not how these programs are run, especially as we're talking about cultural historical significance. That might mean different things to different people. We are open to discussion on that. We were certainly open on to increasing that number. I do think personally that making it limitless is, maybe a little far in the other direction, but I think it could be something we kind of see how many nominations and stuff actually come in, and if that becomes an issue where we need to like cap that again. But we could be certainly open to increasing that or setting that on a higher limit or being flexible about that. Ultimately, that is a park board question and process that you all would vote on as a team. Just to be clear, we can propose it, but that the way this program's set up is for you all to approve changes to the program. Like I said, we're not doing that tonight, but the goal is to hopefully have that kind of ready to go with a process to vote on or make amendments to one last time, hopefully the next couple months.
That's a great question, Nicholas, and to add what Dan said. Yeah, we're not proposing to keep it at 3 at this point. We're also not proposing to change it. So if we're open to the discussion and feedback, if I was to guess, the original intent of 3 was really just to recognize and understand that the special nature of a heritage tree, and that necessarily, every tree becomes a heritage tree, then, right? What's the line in the Incredibles? I'm showing right? If everyone's incredible, then nobody's incredible, right? You're trying to set things apart. But very open to that.
How do we let people know?
Thank you for that.
Let people know where these heritage trees are and what they.
See, good question, Brenda. I think that's lacking right now. That's definitely part of this kind of need for a better outreach process, but also just better documentation and resources in the first place. I mean, right now, pretty much what we have is a web page that lists all the nominations each year, essentially between 2005 and 2012, and it has locations written down, but there's no map. If you just stumble upon one of those, there's nothing that's identifying it as one. So I think that's where there's a lot of potential to better, whether that's at the tree itself, whether that's on our city communications, whether that's, like I said, some of these kind of program marketing and, kind of outreach around our signature kind of tree planting events like Green Issaquah Day and Arbor Day. I think there's a lot of potential to just better bring this to people's attention, whether that's like engaging with, like I said, kind of contest around people submitting photos of favorite trees, things like that. It's lacking right now. It's not on our public GIS map either. So that would be a kind of simple addition to, what we've talked about is developing kind of heritage tree walking tours where someone could like download something or have it on their phone through an app to, essentially be able to kind of go around and have some additional information on those individual trees, maybe that species kind of more broadly in general. But yeah, so right now it's not a lot. So that's
a plaque or a sign.
Exactly. So
Yeah, it's a big goal of this program update is to do that, is to improve outreach and education of the program itself.
You mentioned groves. That's a great idea. A unique grove. What was Issaquah built around? Was it the yellow cedar? And how can we learn more about that?
yeah.
But there's probably one main tree that came and look with it. Part of the city.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's something that we should consider, is there a number of individual heritage trees? And if we do decide on a different category, like, groves or collections, is that something that we're nominating 1, 2, 3 a year as well? Yeah, I think that's a great thing to kind of consider.
I saw
Yeah,
Zach had his hand up, and then I know Tim has his hand raised as well.
Yes, so I guess Nick already kind of touched on what I was thinking too about the 3, if there was anything specific reason for that. But if it is restricted to a certain number, in my opinion anyway, I feel like it should be somewhat triaged based on like the ecosystem services of the tree versus, other factors in terms of like the longevity of the tree, carbon sequestration, that sort of thing. For instance, like the willow there pictured, I think is a shorter lived tree that's more prone to like dying out and sort of issues. It just seems like if there is a limit on the amount of trees, then the trees basically in the selection process should be weighed more heavily, I think, based on the potential lifespan of the tree and ecosystem services versus like that weeping willow there, which I mean, I also don't think is necessarily a native. So that's just my thought. If there is a restriction that that should be weighed more heavily in the decision process.
That's great. I mean, that's the exact type of feedback we're looking for in terms of how to kind of balance these categories. And it might have been you or someone we met last time. It's just like, we don't want to make this just purely like a giant Douglas fir. You know, I think you were kind of advocating for more diversity, especially of our native species as well, which may not grow as big, but could still have a lot of those ecological benefits too. And something that just kind of came to mind too is, you know, there might not be, like I said, specific criteria, but there's really cool tools, like if people are familiar with iTree, which can calculate a lot of benefits of tree species at different age, you know, for water quality benefits, air quality benefits, carbon sequestration. So I mean, that's something that could like be really easily exported as a report for you know, given species. A little bit of it is then customized for our location here, you know, in Issaquah, but so yeah, that could be another good tool as well to, you know, kind of get more of those ecosystem services you're talking about, Zach.
Yeah, or even like, I guess, understory. I mean, I don't know, like in terms of like a tree that perhaps has some sort of significance with perhaps what it does for the understory in that area may also be a factor that doesn't, you know, quickly sort of come to mind, but is also, you know, just as important as the tree itself, sort of what it's, I don't know, perhaps preserving or you know, allowing to sort of grow beneath it, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. We're thinking of kind of collections and grow, especially in natural areas, of kind of what that whole forest structure and ecosystem looks like.
Thanks.
Tim, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, this will be quick because between the time I raised my hands, the discussion pretty much covered everything that I was thinking about. So I think having the public interface is really important. I think, you know, we need to think about some kind of little plaque or something that goes on the trees, something you just suggested something having a website. You know, if people wanted to do a tour one day of the heritage trees in Issaquah, and they could go from site to site and look up, oh, this is tree number 47, and it's, you know, the reason it's important is this. So I think having that public interface so that there's public awareness and public appreciation for the efforts and the energy that we're putting into this, and so they understand how much we appreciate and value the trees. So, you know, I don't want sort of that public interface to be pushed down to sort of a also ran status. I think it needs to be kind of a primary part of the program, because otherwise, why are we doing it? Because if you make a tree a heritage trees and nobody knows it, then what have you really done? You put some protections around it. So I think being able to get the information out to the public is really important. Also, in terms of the selection of the trees, I think it's important that we have some diversity, and some of this has been touched on. Sure, all the big cedars are fantastic, for example, but you know, I think we should have at least an intention, if not certainly not a mandate, but an intention to have the heritage tree population reflect the population of trees in Issaquah. So there are, you know, some Doug fir, some cedars, some all the cottonwoods, what have you, the very important trees in our areas, rather than just focusing on some of the more eye-popping specimens like the big cedars. Yeah, so that's all I have. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, and then I see Sunby, you have your hand raised, or you did?
I was
And-
just gonna say something like along the lines of Tim's talking about, but I think he pretty much covered whatever I was thinking, because at least when I go to some like historical sites, like there's trees and there's all sorts of other places around Issaquah. I like looking at like the boards that they have there about, either if it's a tree or a train or something. So just, I wanted to add on to that.
Yeah, thank you. We'll share some actual plaques and recognition so people know what they are. And then I see Connie is back. I don't know if we want to continue our discussion and then.
Let's wait till we finish and then we'll go to public again. But Marlene had a comment.
I have a couple of questions in the comments. Right now, do we do anything different between public land and private land as we think about heritage trees? Or are they all sort of the same sort of designation, same criteria? I'm just kind of questioning as we increase the number of heritage trees, does that add any additional things we need to think about from a private or public land perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess to kind of preface, of our current 30 or so heritage trees, we have at best a quarter of them on private property right now. So it is a smaller percentage. There's a couple on an actual like single family resident home, and then there's a few that are in like commercial village areas. The thing that I should be real clear about the development protection of heritage tree status, my understanding, as long as public land is public land, that's in perpetuity. So for those trees designated on public land versus on private land, that is, essentially signed off by that current landowner. So Tukwila, for instance, has a voluntary covenant you can like put on your property that essentially would then be, there with it when you sell it. And that would be your decision to do that as a homeowner. So I would say that is probably one of the key differences, is that kind of longevity of the protection. If, someone nominated a tree and moves 10, 15, however many years later, that doesn't necessarily carry on without some kind of thing written into the deed there. And then I would say the selection process too, obviously the vetting is similar in terms of wanting to meet those kind of categories we've talked about, whether that be, as kind of Zach was highlighting, some of the ecosystem or kind of ecological services trees provide, whether that be kind of size, significance, species, diversity stuff we've talked about, or certainly that kind of cultural, historical place that the trees have. That's all pretty similar, but that is definitely going to be coming more from the private landowner to kind of tell that story of that tree, hopefully, and then still, making sure that tree has longevity, staying power, and they're aware of the, kind of added protection that comes with that. But yeah.
It's homeowner discretion, basically.
Yes, simply put, yes. Yeah.
That was kind of my question. And then just in a couple of things, I really like what you're thinking about for cultural and historical as it relates to the Heritage Tree Program. Like, I think continuing to really lean into that. I love that you guys are thinking about that and having a diverse sort of group of stakeholders in that. I think that we should think through how we are inviting those stakeholders into the decision-making criteria. So just to be something to think about.
That's a great idea. And it is actually Elizabeth Walker with the Snoqualmie tribe, who's their tribal forester, was sort of mentioning the stuff in Seattle where they have some kind of comparisons to size of trees, and then kind of broadening out from specifically culturally modified trees, meaning trees that have actually been worked with and altered in some way to, kind of cultural significance too, that I think would be a little bit broader for what they're looking for. So yeah, we are continuing that conversation and kind of waiting, but yeah, I think that if they have interest and capacity, we would absolutely welcome them to, kind of review, provide feedback on, nominations and what we have, certainly on public trees.
And then I just have a question on how we would measure the different ecological benefits. I know there's also other things in our city code that sort of relates around like age of trees and sort of what you can do with them. And so I'm just wondering, are we double dipping on the ecological part of the heritage tree, or is there not protections that we need to also look beyond cultural and historic, that we actually have to look at the ecological? That's a question that I have.
That's a good question. I mean, certainly as our public land trees go, there are a lot of protections around critical areas, buffers of critical areas, things like that.
I just want to double dip. I don't want to make more bureaucracy if it's already taken care of there. Should this program be more related to historic and cultural trees? Just asking the question.
It's a great question. I don't know that we have a full answer. I think your question is getting to, a reality that our code, the tree code, gives some degree of protection to all trees. It also gives some protection to all trees on public land. Right, this heritage tree designation, I think, as we really craft the program, we'll want to sort of recognize, okay, how does this differentiate from sort of the baseline protection that the code gives? I think, is that kind of what you're asking? How do we?
The ecological benefits that we need the trees for, which is super important,
Right.
right? With something different. And so I just want to understand like
I wouldn't,
what protections are already in place.
do you think it's fair to say, I wouldn't say that exists at any level of specificity for the individual tree, I think is somewhat, I mean, we do for like landmark trees, for instance, have a little additional protection. Those are 30-inch diameter plus.
I know, because if you try to remove a tree in your yard, like you can't, right? So I mean, like, we know that we have that, which I think is great. Like I'm advocating for that.
Yeah.
I don't want to duplicate efforts and make it more complicated than it has to be, I guess is my question. If you're telling me like, hey, no, we need this because otherwise these trees won't be protected through those other codes, that's okay. But if it's more like, hey, heritage trees are special for these other reasons, that feels like a different program.
Yeah, if I could add, I think, Marlene, you're getting also to in some ways, your question is answering the first question too, in terms of what are some of the primary reasons we want a heritage tree program. And I think the heritage tree program, yes, has an element of protection, but its primary purpose is not protection alone. It's also it's recognizing and celebrating this heritage tree. And by celebrating that heritage tree, we're also celebrating the importance of all the trees in the city. So yeah, I think, again, as we craft the program, there is an ecological benefit that we'll want to equate and say, hey, this is, this singular tree is playing this role, or it's playing a part in this bigger ecological function. But also, as we, I think, really define why we do this program, it's not a tree preservation program. It's a tree celebration program that has protection benefits.
No, I like that.
Well, so let's let Nicholas go and then I'll.
Can I finish?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Um,
I had a response to something that was said.
Oh, that's okay. No, that's okay. And then my last thing was, as we were thinking about how we think about how we want to define these trees. I know you'd mentioned something like aesthetics, and I guess from my perspective is like, if we can be, aesthetic is like the most judgment-based thing I can do as somebody who makes products for a living, and 8 people want to tell me which color blue is the right one. Like, I feel you. So like, let's be careful about like, when we say aesthetics, like, let's make sure there's operating definitions around what we're doing. I know this program is not meant to be black and white, and I'm not trying to make it black and white, but where we can have operational definitions, I think we should really try.
And to be clear, that's not currently specifically called out, but I did want to say that that's something you'll sometimes see in other heritage tree program.
Yeah, and I'm not saying being beautiful is not a good use of a tree. Like, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, like, just be careful.
Subjectivity becomes sure. Really good points.
Nicholas, I just had it.
Thank you. And this will actually be quick, I hope, which is I just would look forward to seeing some data around the volume of requests over time. If we had 10 years, I'd look at 10 years. If we didn't, I would look at whatever you have.
So previous sort of volume we've had currently.
Yeah, unless you have a forecast. But if you don't, then I just look back at, when we say we're debating this and we're changing the structure, the qualities of the program, I think is important. But, as far as the leveling and what we think is the appropriate throughput, for me, it would help determine what I feel about that. If I knew kind of, are we cutting people off at 3, or is 3 really a stretch goal for us already in this city? And if we drive some of this programmatic change, or is it going to, increase the volumetrics?
Mm-hmm.
Hyperbolic curves tend to become asymptotic. So yeah, unlimited is probably not the best way to move, but
I think, Nicholas, it's been pretty small. I don't know if I have, or we have exact numbers on that. I do know a lot of our initial heritage trees were nominated by our past city arborists. Some of those working with the private landowners, you know, kind of to educate on the program, and then certainly ones he nominated and just brought to the park board. So I don't think the volume was even in the dozens. It was in the single digits pretty consistently.
Yeah, it's a great question, Nicholas, and if I can add to just my, again, observation predates me, but well, I guess it doesn't current data would tell me that the interest in updating this program isn't because we need to somehow slow down the volume of applications. I think our desire and intent in updating this program, now that we have Dan here, we have an urban forest supervisor, we have an urban forest management plan happening, is this program has needed a refresh, what to basically create a face for the program. I think this program really hasn't had an outward face. And how do we, again, update this, give it more of a, give it more visibility than it really has. So.
Okay, I have some comments. Previously and let me preface, you're gonna think I don't like trees, but I do like trees. I think they're incredibly important. Yes, they're coming after me already. Previously, when we have discussed this, and when I have discussed this, and also I think, you know, conversation with you, Vasanti, we talked about the code recognizing significant trees and landmark trees. But I've taken a moment to look at the code, and it separately and specifically identifies heritage trees. And I bring this up because it says right here, no person may remove, excessively prune, or top any protected, non-protected significant tree, landmark tree, or heritage tree except as provided by this chapter. And there's a bunch of rules. So we are, by participating in this heritage tree program, we are participating in a tree protection effort. So it's a little different than I think we've been, our understanding has been. What I don't see in here is anything about the, you know, the designation. So we have that flow chart that we would participate in. And then I think based on our role, we could maybe provide a recommendation, and then it would continue on. But what I also don't see here is anything about a homeowner or transfer of title or anything like that. And so it's sounding kind of fuzzy and a little bit potentially dangerous. And the, you know, it's great to protect trees, but it seems like it could become an issue for a homeowner or a private property owner. That's something we probably need to clarify. And it could even be for the public property in the city. And then whatever we end up with, hopefully is some type of program, despite what I think after my previous comments. I do think it should be on the GIS site and you know, some sort of identification and story about each tree, or a little documentation so that someone can look it up. Go investigate further.
Excellent points. And you're right, the code makes reference to the Heritage Tree program, but that does not get into the specifics. And so again, thus the need to really update, in some ways clarify the Heritage Tree program. So we have some of that understanding, and whether it's on public property or private property, there's an understanding of what somebody should be expecting. And you're right, Chris, it's a great point. My intent earlier was not to say there's no protection as part of this program. There is, but I think as Dan and I are looking at this, and you look at how other cities do the program, right? Is it first and foremost a protection program? Because if it is, I would have some concerns with that. I'll just say that as staff, that becomes really hard as staff. If it's a program that has, we're really wanting to recognize and understand the value and importance of trees. And while we have this heritage tree program, we understand there are protections that come with that designation, and we're going to commit to those. I would be concerned and forgive me if this is going too far, but you know, there are some who would want a heritage tree program to become a weapon. Or sort of weaponize that as a way of getting around development or getting around something happening. And that would, as we go into this program and try and develop it, we want to be really intentional and really artful in it not being a program that's seen as or is used as a weapon, but is used as a way to celebrate trees and the importance of trees and protect trees, but do it in a valued way, not in a, we're going to protect this tree to make sure something else doesn't happen. That loses the merits of the program.
And I guess if I can add just real quick to kind of to Marlene's point, I mean, we essentially have two routes for tree removal. There's, you know, just a standalone tree removal permit, and that's where you're kind of lumping significant trees, landmark trees, heritage trees. That's not significantly different, even though I'm pretty sure a heritage tree can't be removed under the nuisance tree definition. But if it's a deemed a hazard tree, if it's dead, dying, or diseased, and can, you know, cause issues with that spreading, essentially that's not much added protection from what we have through the standalone tree removal permit. The thing that I'd say is different is, you know, the development route or redevelopment of property, where you're a little bit more allowed, I guess, lack of a better word, to remove trees as long as then you're replacing and hitting certain canopy, you know, replacement or retention requirements that we have in our code for different sub areas in the city. So that to me is the biggest difference. And to your point, Chris, I don't know anywhere that specifically says about the lack of a covenant or anything like that. That's just talking to our planners is like, oh, I don't think anything like that would exist around this program. But that's not written into our code saying that, you know, after you move or sell your home or, and, you know, anything like that, that doesn't get handed down. But, you know, if we need to make that clear or something, that's something we could decide. But that's just my understanding is that a program like this, similar to Puyallup, it's an optional thing that you kind of have to proactively put on your property. To essentially, if you want that to be included in the sale of that property in the future.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. Most cities where a designation of a tree on private property, we would want to clarify that as part of the program, maybe not necessarily in the code, but that owner should expect and understand it's their choice. They can choose to put something on the title as a permanent covenant. If they do that, that could have impacts on the value of their private property. But private residents also have the choice to designate a heritage tree, not put something on their title. And then that allows, when it's sold, the next private property owner to make their own, that heritage designation doesn't stick with the property.
Seems like we should include that, you know, almost like a disclaimer.
Correct. In the program.
Property owner is, you know, saying, okay, I'm gonna do this, somebody
Yep.
nominated my tree, and it says, you know, I, citizen, Q citizen, accept this or, you know, sign this, but down below it says, you know, this does not persist after, you know, sale of property or something like that.
Yeah, I think even just like a simple write-up of what the differences between general, you know, whether that be significant tree, landmark tree, tree removal, and development tree removal processes, and how heritage trees is either the same or, you know, different in those two paths, and also the private property. So yeah, we could essentially have like a couple paragraph just in, you know, linking to the code.
For the code, it's the same as a significant tree or landmark.
And keep in mind, that's standalone tree removal. But if you're removing it as part of development, you can remove a landmark tree as part of a development. It might have higher replacement requirements. You cannot remove a heritage tree as part of a development or redevelopment. So that's a different part of our code. And I'd be happy to, I can look that up and then send that back over too, but yeah.
And again, that's where is we're posing these questions and wanting, you know, do we want to offer different levels, right? Different levels of designation. Could that be something we consider, or just again, given that heritage designation brings with it all. Bit more.
I guess, you know, based on kind of what we're talking about and sort of what we want the heritage tree to move into, where people see them, or do we want to have private property trees in this program?
I mean, they could be included and not included on that like map of visitation, and like they could be mapped and noted as private.
It doesn't look like we're adding a ton of complexity.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to simplify, right? Like, you guys know I'm always trying to simplify stuff.
Mhm.
So like, my question is the benefit of having private heritage trees worth the added complexity of all the things we've been talking about, which is probably just scratching the surface of all the things we'd actually need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I would distinguish though between commercial, which is privately owned, but I would argue to some extent, that's certainly publicly accessible. And that's where we have a lot of our private, or I'd say, 4 of the 6 or 5 of the 7 trees we have on private property or commercial property right next to Issaquah Coffee Company, where hundreds of people go every day. In Gilman Village. So there's a little difference versus, single family home or multifamily homes that are truly, like private residences. That is a good question.
I don't know the answer. I'm just sort of asking a question.
That's what I'm saying. I just differentiate between those areas in terms of kind of how the ability for people to go connect with these trees is, which
It's
is
a great point in terms of mapping that, there would need to be some notation of how, where you could view it and where you could view it from.
Seems like if it's a private property, say that the system does evolve to include private property trees, it would be appropriate to say, do you want?
what sort of level
Shown on the map?
Yeah.
Do you want this listed?
I don't think that's too different from what we're kind of weighing with the Snoqualmie tribe too, in terms of what level of information they want publicly available. They might be okay with the species and the cultural significance behind it. They really want to push that education, but not the specific location, not attracting tons of people out there to go see it, even if it is on public land. That's kind of my take.
Zach, you've got your hand up. Thanks for patiently waiting.
Yeah, no problem. I guess just thinking I guess it might come across as someone antagonizing. What's the point of a heritage tree on a private land? Obviously, if a landowner is nominating their tree, they value it. They're not going to cut it down. It doesn't carry through in any sort of protections other than what they write and stipulate into the sale of their home. So it seems as though, other than, I suppose, celebrating the tree, but in terms of protections, if they value the tree will be protected. And if they sell it and the person purchasing the land does not value the tree, then the tree will not persist, right? I guess, unless it's on like a private land that's like a condominium or something, but generally like a single like homeowner, it doesn't seem like, since it doesn't really carry through in terms of like affecting the sale of the house or whatever, you would have to stipulate it in the sale of the home. It seems like there's not really a lot of value in creating like a heritage tree on a private landowner's.
It's a great point, Zach. And again, that is a decision of the private property owner. How other cities have handled that. So to your point, I don't think it's antagonistic at all. It speaks to the question and the value of that private property owner would have. That private property owner, if they wanted to make sure that tree was protected in perpetuity, they then could choose to put that covenant on the title as the owner. And then realize that by putting that covenant on the title, you may, when it does come to time to resell, that's your own personal decision to weigh the pros and cons of. But that's how other cities have done it. And I think how Dan and I have talked about is that ability for that private owner to put the covenant protection on the title is a sole decision of theirs to make. Would be a sole decision of theirs to make.
I think Marty talked a little bit about aesthetic value of the tree. So can you elaborate a little bit more on you compared with other heritage tree programs? They usually say of aesthetic value, it's a criterion, but in this case, we specifically removed it as a sort of a criterion.
I wouldn't say removed it, it's just it wasn't included initially. So yeah, whether that's something we would want to broaden out, I think is kind of more of the question, but
I think we have a bunch of beautiful
blooming trees up and down.
It really does get into, yeah, a lot of the cherry trees, things like that. And we certainly have some of those in our program. They're by no means like the biggest trees or even necessarily biggest of that variety. They may not have huge levels of ecological value necessarily, but their core. I get calls randomly about like what type of variety of cherries or even what variety of dogwood we have on Front Street. I just got a call this week from someone passing through town just asking if I could tell them. So I mean, it definitely stands out and gives us character to our kind of downtown core. But yeah, it's something that I think kind of fits those type of species maybe more than kind of Zach was highlighting some of the native species and ecosystem benefits, or obviously some of the indigenous kind of cultural significance, or ties to early Issaquah, in terms of like European migrants and all that. So yeah.
And maybe just comment on some of the discussion points on number 4. You asked about participation. Have you thought about maybe doing a sponsorship program same way we do for benches in the park, where you can invite residents to sponsor like a plaque? Regarding number 5, I think heritage, we need re-education first on what a heritage tree is. Selfishly, I'm a park board member, but before this was brought up, I had to Google what heritage tree is. So before expanding to the other designation level, maybe it will be better to enrich the re-education or informing the residents on what the heritage.
Clear definitions, whether it's one level or multiple. Yeah, it's a great point.
Anyone else?
Great discussion.
Is Connie available? We'll give public comment.
Is available and we can do public comment, and then I'm gonna ask Dan to be very quick with the rest of his presentation.
Well, there's yeah.
Great. Connie, are you there? Do you want to unmute?
We are, look at that. I actually solved my problem. You can hear me this time, right?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Hunky dory, totally my fault. Heritage trees. I actually tried to get heritage trees as a community member on public property. I don't even remember how long ago that was, but my concern is the London plane trees planted in the 70s by the Parks Department along Tibbetts Valley Park in Newport Way. And the city of Issaquah wants to widen that section of Newport Way, and their plan would threaten that big long stand of trees along Newport Way and then going up into Tibbetts Valley Park. And so I was shut down because it was more than 3 trees. I was grumpy. I continue to be grumpy, right? The city of Issaquah has been a Tree City USA for a very long time. Our code does not particularly protect trees. It's really quite easy to say, we can't save these trees. And they say, okay, you can plant off-site. We don't really know what that means yet. Or you can replant on-site. So the idea that we have a strict code that is protecting our larger or more significant trees is not really true. They have to explain why they need to take the trees down. But in our world of climate and development and city identity heavily based in trees, it seemed to me exceptionally important to try to bring along the community and the city in understanding what the most important trees are to protect in order to preserve our environment and our sense of place. And the changes that I can see to the code initially don't serve that purpose. So when I went cruising around, I did like Puyallup creating a list of the trees that they thought were worthy of significance and they were worthy of saving. And because they have a very old town, they asked the community to come out and say what trees do they think are important. And I think that that is a big part of Issaquah, is we have all these people who are looking at Issaquah going, wow, this is the greenest, most tree-oriented town I have ever seen. And isn't it amazing? And then you have another group of people whom I won't mention who think, well, you know, trees, they'll regrow again and it's not that big of a deal. So I think everybody could be educated on what trees we need to keep. For me, I think trees in this area especially have grown in groups. And so the idea of single trees being something that you protect is not really the habitat that was originally here, and does not serve the purpose of placemaking in Issaquah. It was groupings of trees, maybe a little bit of meadow, and then I have the idea that the park board needs to have more say in advance of decision being done by the park director. I think you all should. My particular thing didn't really come back to park board because I was just told no, because they didn't think the application was for more than 3 trees. And so it's like, I didn't, you know, I got to whine and wail with department heads and staff, as many as I could get, but it didn't sort of broadly educate the community on a thing. So I think it's important that the park board get this decision-making before the deal is done. All right, one last thing. We have as our city tree, Eddie's White Wonder Dogwood, which is a non-native sort of gnarly dogwood. And I don't know why. It seems like perhaps we would want to have trees that could be future heritage trees as our city tree. Anyway, hopefully this was you understand a little bit better the story of how we got to where we are at this point in time. Thanks.
Thanks, Connie. Okay,
Okay, well,
back to Dan.
go through these. Like I said, these are hopefully mostly just kind of quick hitting updates on our urban forest team. I'll chat briefly about Green Issaquah, some of the environmental education work we're doing as a team, our park ranger team, and just kind of some recap on tree work over the last year or so. So that's Alex Anderson on the right, our park ranger, Taylor Nichols in the middle, our volunteer coordinator for Green Issaquah, and Vera, who was our seasonal park ranger last year. So yeah, hopefully everyone's familiar with our Green Issaquah program. This has been in place for a few years now, but run in-house since my position and Taylor's position started about a year ago. Really looking to improve forest and natural area health, galvanize and inform and involve community through stewardship, volunteerism, and ensure long-term sustainability for our forests and parks and natural areas, which encompass about 1,500 acres, or pushing almost 20% of our city land mass. So these are just kind of some quick hitters for Green Issaquah in 2023, and hopefully you're maybe familiar too that we have a 20-year implementation plan. So we actually do have a guide for this program and goals that have been set annually through the next 15 or so years now at this point, but over a 20-year period. So I won't read all of these, but you can see we far surpassed our volunteer hours, which is great. By we had a goal of, I think, 2,400. That's not written there, sorry, but we had almost 3,200 volunteer hours in 2023, 70 events. You can kind of see the mix of corporate work parties, public events hosted by forest stewards. So those are dedicated, ongoing, recurring volunteers that do some of their own work, even lead their own small events. And then really, leaning on work with our partners like Issaquah Alps Trails Club, Mount Sound Greenway, Trout Unlimited has been super involved starting this year, that also run events at Issaquah Parks as part of Green Issaquah. So we've had 10 active forest stewards, and we have 2 high school interns, Mina and Leilani, and they've been very helpful on some of the heritage tree research this year too, in the bottom right there. So really focus on that hands-on stewardship, but also the kind of education and engagement for folks that might want more of the context or maybe aren't as able to come out and pull blackberry and plant trees. So bird walks, forest steward training, and really expanding educational opportunities. Kind of mentioned bookending our planting season with Green Issaquah Day in the fall and Arbor Day at the start of the spring. So something we can hop to the next one, which I think we'll have a little more on environmental education. So we hosted 29 events in 2023. Topics were kind of wide ranging: forest health, plant identification, salmon ecology, a little bit on our carbon credits, ranger programs, how to be good outdoor users of our park space. And, it engaged 400 people, and you can kind of see the youth adult breakdown on that too. So, and then park rangers, I mentioned Alex Anderson. We do have a new seasonal park ranger, Casey Shane, who just started with us a few weeks ago. So we have everyday coverage in the spring and summer months. That's a 6-month position. So he's about a month into that position. So routine patrol, this is not law enforcement. I think you all know that. So we really focus on what we say enforcement through education. So there's kind of the current staff, and they do work really closely with our human services team on homeless outreach. They do some kind of general parks and trail maintenance, support a ton of our Green Issaquah work as well. And as we kind of chat on that last slide, a lot of the interpretation and outdoor education as well. These are just from the first quarter. Our park ranger, if you ever want to see more of these, does annual reports and then quarterly reports of the type of contacts and kind of some other metrics. So, you can kind of see the stuff that he's responding to: illegal dumping, off-leash dogs, vandalism, graffiti, homeless outreach. So this is, just in January through March of this year, 141 total contacts. This is all tracked on GIS, which is great. So we can go back to it, see where there's problem areas, see where there's hot spots. That's probably a low quarter, about 1,100 pounds of litter or illegal dumping pulled out of our parks. Sometimes that's 2,000 plus. Then you can see some of the education initiatives: leave no trace, signs, pamphlets, really educating on, like I said, how to be responsible recreators in our parks. Park ranger, responsible dog owners. That's actually a national park program that we're borrowing, junior ranger program. And then Alex has gotten really good interest in our outdoor 101, really trying to get people more comfortable with recreating in the outdoors that maybe haven't done that much before. And then kind of summarizing some tree work here. So this one, just to kind of caveat, this is our planting season. So kind of starting in October of last year through Arbor Day just a few weeks ago, which ended our planting season. We've put in 2,500 native trees across 15 different parks, another 730 native shrubs, really focusing on understory, as we've talked about, and forest edge habitat, along our trail corridors in a lot of places. We've really upped our tree pruning, whether that's for visibility, clearance, or certainly tree health as well. So that's both, contracted pruning work and then also our parks operations team. So that has already doubled the amount we did the previous season, that 829 trees. And then 19 trees, lost or removed. A lot of these trees come down in storms, and we end up cleaning up from our trails, stuff like that too. So to kind of differentiate between there. So that's kind of what we've lost so far this past season. And then, celebrated our 32nd City of Issaquah Arbor Day on April 6th to bookend that planting season. So that's, like I said, our 32nd year as a Tree City USA. And then, this is kind of looking at those Green Issaquah goals moving forward: 2,800 volunteer hours, 12 forest stewards, so adding at least 2 more. We're hoping to do more than that. We actually just had a forest steward orientation this past Saturday and had 8 people show up, but they seem really interested. A few folks new to Issaquah and kind of building community through our Green Issaquah program, which is awesome. And then upping our acres enrolled in restoration to almost 100, which this past year, our goal, I believe, was 65 or 70, and we were just short of that, but pretty close. And these are some of the initiatives I kind of mentioned we've already had this year. March 2nd was our Outdoors 101. Coexisting with Carnivore panel was great, kind of connecting the work we're doing around forest conservation, restoration, and our wildlife in Issaquah. Arbor Day at Confluence Park, new forest steward orientation. And then really kind of quick update. This will be coming back to you all in the next couple months on the urban forest management plan. The last time I did talk to you all was the joint meeting with the environmental board as we launched the survey. Thank you all for participating in that, spreading the word. We ended up having about 200 35 responses to that, and our consultants are really kind of working to analyze that, plus some of the other benchmarking and kind of forest audit stuff they've been working on based on some of our existing city documents, interviews with city staff, stakeholders, all that sort of stuff. So we should have a draft outline, goal strategies, and recommendations to bring back to you all in June is the goal, and hope to have that as something a little bit more tangible. It's going to start looking like the bones of the plan, which is really exciting. And that, I believe, is it. Might be a slide at the end there. So yeah, thank you all for, like I said, a lot of really, really good feedback and food for thought today, and excited to bring both, more info on the forest management plan and heritage trees back here in a couple months.
Just real quick, more of a comment, like one, thank you for all the outreach and all of the education that you guys are doing. I think that's really cool to see the stats. I don't think we see that all the time, so I just really appreciate that. And then one of the things we talked about, and it was a little bit different, it was more about rec facilities last month. It was about connecting more with the school district. So I know obviously Issaquah High School and Issaquah Middle School, they're right out on Tiger. Nick and my son are actually in the same class, which is backyard forest. And so they spend a lot of time learning about the environment, going on hikes, doing that stuff. So that might be another potential way to reach out. That's a program that's pretty popular, I think, in the middle school at least. So it might be a good way to try to make a connection. And I can, if you want to connect with the person who runs that.
That would be awesome.
What I hear from my son and my husband just went on their hike last week. He has a plethora of information. So
we'd love to figure out ways we can support that. As Gibsonac has been kind of our main in, but knowing the high school and middle school, there's a lot more potential there to do some of the youth education too. So
That's a great point. Dan, thank you very much for that update. Not only as our forest supervisor, but really bringing your skills. We've really been able to up our, in many ways, create a natural resource division, natural resource team within our park operations team. So it's really, as the results show, really helped us diversify how we're stewarding our parks and all the diversity in our system. So big thanks. Big thanks as well for the heritage tree discussion, all of you. Very helpful. Our public spaces speak to our culture and our heritage and who we are as a community in so many ways. And if I can segue, Chris, I think another thing that speaks to our public spaces and our culture is history, is art. And Amy's here to give a really fun update on our Plazas project, we're calling Plazas plural, Pedestrian Park Plaza and Senior Center Plaza, but just some really fun work happening with a local artist. So Amy, please take it away.
And I thank you for having me this evening. I think it's been about a year since I've been here, so I'm not sure that I have met all of you, but I'm Amy Dukes. I'm the cultural arts manager for the city. And I'm going to continue on with the celebrating trees theme, and it'll all make sense in just a few slides. So, as Jeff mentioned, this is an update on the public art that is going into the downtown plazas, Pedestrian Park and Senior Center Plaza. I think you all had updated those projects pretty recently, right? So you may have heard that there is art being included in the plazas. We actually were planning to put art in no matter what, but fortunately we're able to receive a grant from the Washington State Arts Commission through our creative district designation. So we recently were awarded $112,000, $112,500 to put public art into these two projects. So this really helped to up that budget so that the art could be significant. It's really tiny on there, but the artist for this project, I think it was on the other slide as well, is June Sakaguchi. So we, the Arts Commission put out a call for qualifications to select an artist. We had great response. We had, I think, 40 something submissions, which is really wonderful. And it was narrowed down to a handful, and the Arts Commission reviewed everything. We review everything kind of in a blind way so that they're really looking at just previous artwork. And they selected June as their first choice. Usually they select a couple of choices because sometimes we select artists who are really busy and popular and can't quite fit their into our timeline. So fortunately, she was available to take the commission. And so her process, I just want to share with you, this is actually her presentation that she gave to the Arts Commission earlier this month. So I'm sure I won't quite do it justice, but I will try. So her research, the first thing that she wanted to do, and I should note, June was actually a resident of Issaquah for many years. I don't know if any of you know her, but she was very actively engaged in the community. She's moved away probably about a decade ago, lives in the Tacoma area, but has since moving away become a pretty well-known nationally public artist with commissions all over the place. But Issaquah holds a special place in her heart, so, and she's very familiar with the community. So part of her process was to research, sort of just to kind of come up with some themes that she might want to explore. And so she actually met with a couple of members of the Snoqualmie tribe. Ginger de Los Angeles is actually the artist who we worked with for the Jacob Two Trees sculpture. She's actually the one that braided the cedar for his bracelet and hairband. And then we also worked with Stephen on that project as well, who's the archaeologist for the tribe. So she met with both of those members. She also met with the history museums. And then she, I think, is personal friends with Milenko Madanovich, who used to run Pomegranate Center in Issaquah a long time ago, and who was one of the original champions of the Issaquah Treasures. I don't know if you guys know the Treasures, but I think it's from the late 90s. Do you guys know? And there's like 35 things about Issaquah that people hold dear, that the community voted on. So she kind of looked at that list. In addition to that, the Arts Commission had contracted with Don Fells, a local artist, to do kind of a plan with history and art and some themes that are important to Issaquah. And then she, of course, had her own personal reflections on raising her family here and living here. And then I think she pretty early on, especially with her conversations with the tribe, started to zero in on just sort of nature as a theme. And she kind of looked at some of the various local flora and fauna for inspiration. But ultimately, she landed on the Western Red Cedar as the inspiration for the sculpture that she wanted to explore. And she kept hearing from all the people that she talked with how important the cedar was to life in Issaquah among all different cultural groups. And she was really drawn to it in large part because of the braiding of the, what's the right word? See, I'm not a tree person. The needles or the is it needles? No. Yeah. So her work is very much influenced by geometric forms. And so she started to really explore the braiding as well as the cone. And then just sort of the reason why she decided that the cedar was the place to really put her emphasis, just all the ways in which it was important to people here. So this is a huge jump from that to and maybe I will hold on one sec. Maybe I'll go back to those. So another pattern that she explored was actually the cellular structure of the cedar. So she was really interested in the way under the microscope, how that looks and what those different patterns and textures are. And as it turns out, with the sculpture that she started to create, she actually needed to fill in some open space for safety and other reasons. So this became an extra layer within her sculpture. The materials that she plans to use are steel, and then there's a coating that is similar to powder coating, but is a new process that enables, which I'm excited about because this enables the sculpture to get touch-ups without having to be like removed and sanded down and powder coated. So she's going to use this new
material, and we've identified a fabricator. So now I guess I will go back to. So she came up with 2 different sculptures. So I can show you the site plan after these. I'm sorry, I feel like she did this in such a better, smooth way. But the sculpture here would be at the Pedestrian Plaza. And that one, you can kind of see it from a 3D perspective. So height wise, all of these people are sort of normal sized adults. This would be, I'll show you on the map where at Pedestrian Plaza, I believe this is Pedestrian Plaza 1. And then the second large sculpture is this one, which has a more elongated. Again, her artwork is not intended to be literal at all. So this is the essence of the Western cedar. And, it would have that extra layer, which you're not seeing woven in, which is that cellular structure pattern. And then these cones are actually enormously exaggerated because the cone on the Western red cedar is actually quite tiny. So again, it's just all kind of inspired by. This just kind of give you some different ideas of size. So this would be the Pedestrian Park Plaza area, and where that star is down beneath is where that would go. Where you're seeing yellow circles, there will be some smaller sculptures that will kind of guide you through. And so the idea for those, which she doesn't have a mock-up on this presentation, but is that cone structure. So there would be the large and then a cone, and then you would cross over to the Senior Center Plaza, and there would be another large sculpture, and then where you see the yellow circle, there would be a cone. So those are the concepts to share.
Really great concepts. Amy, as where the stars are, I thought it was interesting that the conversation with the Arts Commission and the artist on understanding these 2 parks have some physical separation and letting the art pieces sort of be beacons, if you will.
Right. Yeah, so the thought would be that these would be placed so that you could see the sculpture here at the Senior Center Plaza as you're standing over at Pedestrian Park. And so the little cones along the way would kind of guide you to that. The artist is also designing some ideas for the space in between the 2 plazas, in the hope that we will be able to make that connection, and then we would sort of sync it up with additional.
Right. So no, I really appreciate it. And we've talked a lot, right? As we're phase 1, realizing this needs to function in its phase 1 state, but also realizing the goal is that with community response and use, phase 2, that middle area, Depot Park, really becomes that next phase of development. So.
Just a quick question. When will this project be completed? So the designs have gone to Arts Commission, Creative District Advisory Board, and you guys. So the designs are now kind of going to actual to engineering and fabrication, but we'll hold a little bit on fabrication until we fully understand the construction timeline for the plazas. So fabrication would probably only take a couple of months, and then the installation would happen more toward the end of the park project.
So we are hopefully on the tail end of permitting. We should be out to bid. I think right now we have bid award for the project, for the park, the capital projects, to be going to council in July with the goal. If you remember, we anticipate ribbon cutting completion spring of next year. So imagine, cutting a ribbon on these spaces in April as the weather's turning good. The goal would be, as we cut a ribbon, these art pieces are there.
Yeah, and we were able to get generally all the footings and locations and everything into the permitting set. So it should be pretty easy to get them installed. And I really appreciated your comment, Marlene, about the 8 different colors and everybody's got an opinion. So the color that you saw on those sculptures on the interior was green, and that is still sort of being worked through with Mithun, who's working on the designs and also making decisions about colors of site furniture and other things. So we're trying to agree on a color that will harmonize with everything.
Nicholas, I see your hand up.
Oh yeah, I didn't know if anybody else was in the room was going to say something. So just thank you for art. Thank you for grants. Spending other people's money on art is always more fun than spending, city general fund on art. And so I just can't express enough, in my opinion, just one person, how much art goes such a long way in placemaking. I can already think of some of the installations that are around the senior center and how welcoming that is for outsiders who maybe aren't in the senior center to approach the space, engage with it in a different way. And I just am excited to see more of that throughout our parks complex, essentially. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. I did want to mention the story behind the artwork. We really do want to make sure that that is told well. So we have, and I wanted to jump in when Dan was talking, we have an app that we have a subscription to for the arts program, which is called Story, but STQRY. And we're working on updating it with all of our public art collection, but it has infinite possibilities for other city assets. So we could include trails or heritage trees. They just did a huge revamp of the app. And so now it's very aesthetically pleasing and it's really easy to create itineraries and things. So I can chat more with you guys about that, but we'll at the very least have some signage and QR codes and then connection to this app so people can better understand.
Just to tag on to that, Amy, that's great. And really, our desire as managers of these public spaces is how cool would it be to have one resource, that one app that is someone's able to look up the art pieces in Issaquah parks or the heritage trees or the memorial benches, right? That could be another asset that can all be folded in. So that's awesome.
We can have 99 different asset lists. So yeah, lots of room.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay. We move into reports. Youth representatives.
Yes, Sunday and Arshea, it's all you for your youth report.
Okay, so we haven't really, I don't think we have that much of a big update since our last park board meeting. We've still been working on planning the hackathon that's supposed to happen on June 1st. And
we did just have an event. It was our middle school dodgeball tournament on Friday, April 26th. That was a big hit. We had like a bunch of people show up. Everyone really liked it. And so, yeah.
I think Nick's son organized it, didn't he, Nicholas? Wasn't your son one of the main organizers?
Well, he at least refereed it, but I can say that what was interesting about being there is I saw Marlene there, and that wasn't planned. And I saw several other members of kind of cross-community attendance from that event. So I saw parents from, my son's old soccer club. They now play on the Gunners, or I guess they're called Liverpool, and just other community members. So it was just such a great, because it's not a specific school sport. It was just drawing kids in from all over the different, I guess, the areas of Issaquah School District. I don't know if it was just middle schools in the area or what have you, but it was really well attended. And yeah, it was emotional. There were highs, there were lows, and then there were cupcakes. So it was great.
It was a huge hit. So hats off to youth board and staff. I know as staff, we even taught, I think we might have a tradition in the works for a fun middle school.
Usually, I think prior, not last year, but the year before, dodgeball, it used to be called dodgeball and donuts. It used to just be an annual kind of thing that the youth board used to put on. Back when we were fifth graders. So we weren't on the youth board, we didn't know about any of this, but it used to be an annual thing that they did for middle and high schoolers. And then other than the dodgeball event, there is another event the youth board is hosting called Arts in the Park, I believe. It's also supposed to happen sometime in June. I believe it's also targeted towards elementary and middle schoolers. So that's pretty much that's what's going on with the youth board, because we basically have our like official end date in about like a month or so, like a month and a half maybe. So
Yeah. Around that.
yeah, but that's it from the youth board.
My hand.
Thank you
I have
both.
a question. Sorry. Might I ask a question really quick?
Yeah.
So just, is there, thanks for presenting here. It's been great having you all at meetings. If I could show up, it would be even better. But just, is there a need for like a call for applications to help backfill? Sometimes if the season's ending, that might mean some people are moving off the Issaquah Youth Board. So are they looking for new members?
Yeah,
Yes.
so applications have been open since April 1st. I don't know how many spots there are in the youth board. I don't believe we talk about that as much. I think that's more something that's left up to Katie and Kathy. But yeah, the youth board does do most of the interviewing and application reviewing process. And the stuff to apply should be up on the youth board website.
On the website, on the
So
Issaquah
yeah, I
website.
do know that the applications close on May 7th though.
Yeah, so to anyone, if you could all spread the word, that'd be great, because we're looking for tons of new applicants.
Well, Nicholas, it's a great question. Yeah, as a city run program, it's something that we have, the application cycle's open this spring, and again, youth board do a great job of helping us screen future or those applications for the next school year's group. Usually youth board over the past 20 plus years has probably averaged anywhere from 30 to 40 youth board members every year.
Yeah, that usually ends up being our number.
Yeah.
Jeff, inside the community center, there's a tile program for, it looked like, cross town rivalry youth boards, like Bellevue versus, they have like a little, like inside there's like a mosaic, I guess. And I don't recall this from when I was in Maywood Middle School, like way back in the day, or, Liberty, but is there a reason that stopped, or is that something they're gonna, or is there a way to, well, I should maybe ask the youth board members. I wonder if there's ever any plans to start kind of spreading out the youth board engagement to make sure that we're talking cross city for other youth boards.
I think
we have actually, like, this was in like one of our goals. I don't know when it's going to get executed, whether it's this year or next year, but we were hoping to collaborate with another youth board. I think maybe Issaquah Highlands or something like that, because they have their own board. And kind of like collaborate and do a community service project somewhere nearby. So
yeah, so I know our leadership to add on to that. I think our leadership team was also looking at that this year. Given the youth board's been a little bit rocky this year, given the different like cuts that we've had to make to our annual events. Like, we're not having the AC Kids Triathlon this year. We've had to cut a couple of other annual events. So I think this might be something we're looking forward to next year. And like Arshia said, Issaquah Highlands is something we were looking at. I think Sammamish was also on the board. So probably something that'll happen next year.
Yeah. And I do just want to make note that the Youth Advisory Board is actually open to middle and high school students within the entire Issaquah School District. So it's open to our neighboring cities as well. And we have representatives from pretty much all of the middle schools and high schools, including some private schools, as well as working to include the homeschool population as well. So we try to be as inclusive as possible with the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board. And yes, applications are open. They're due soon. They'll be reviewed in mid-May, and decisions will be made in June for which positions will be open and available. And usually that comes with students that either want to rotate off of the board because they have other obligations, or those that are graduating, our seniors that graduate. Yeah. Thank you both. Director report.
Oh, my turn.
To you.
Okay, okay. So yeah, boy, along with Youth Advisory Board and coming to an end of a school year, April also brings a transition to boards and commissions. Our newly appointed park board members will be starting in May. I wanted to give a big thank you and acknowledge those that are stepping off the park board. That includes Brad Book and Zach and Andrew. I first want to just give, I know Brad wasn't able to join us tonight, but just a big public kudos to Brad Book. Brad has served on this park board for 12 years. It's multiple terms. 6 of those years he served as park board chair. I know he was chair when I arrived as in my role in late 2016, and just so appreciated working with Brad in that role, his role as chair, and in my role as a new director, just understanding sort of culture of the park board, what had been going on with the park board. We've seen a lot of transition with the park board, and I think some real exciting engagement in terms of real advisory work that the park board is doing. And I give a big thank you to Brad and those early years working with him as the chair. So his passion, his heart for Issaquah is huge. I think we all know that. So just a public thank you to Brad Book and all the work that he has done for this community, and will continue to work. Brad has certainly said, and thank you. I'm glad we've added ad hoc groups to the park board. Brad's very excited to continue to work with all of us in an ad hoc or in some of those ad hoc roles. So big thank you there.
And just also wanted to say, oh yeah, round of applause. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to both Zach and Andrew, you all having been on the board during my tenure here, and just thank you for both of your engagement on our ad hocs. And Zach for, I know you were the co-chair and then chair for a couple of years, and just a big thank you to you both.
They're here. Yes, big thanks. So yeah, we'll have a couple, some new members joining us in May, but boy, all 3 of you, your service has been well appreciated. Farmers Market kicks off. Here we are, the end of April. This coming Saturday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Star Wars Day. Head to Farmers Market on Saturday, and then that season kicks off. Park system plan update continues to move along well. We have an online mapping survey that is out and open. We're going to be extending that opening, or that survey being open. It's going to close on May the 7th. So thank you for getting that news out and spreading that. Please continue to do that. Robin and Julie and Asanthe are going to have a presence at Farmers Market on Saturday, just as another way of sharing that the park system plan update's going on and inviting responses to that online mapping tool. So thank you very much for that. That's huge. Speaking of the park plan update, May 30th, our upcoming park plan meeting, we're going to be bringing to you. I think a lot of that plan, as it's starting to form and take shape, all this public outreach is working towards an actual document. Design workshop is beginning to draft some of the early chapters. We as staff are beginning to take a look at calling through all the public feedback and the feedback that's coming on the survey tool. By May 30th, we'll have a list and a general description of some projects. Some beginning looking at criteria and how we want to prioritize those projects. So we'll be meeting with the ad hoc group prior to that May 30th meeting, but just saying that with a little foreshadowing that there's some, I think some exciting work, and all of this park system plan work that you've been giving and feedback you've been giving over the recent months has not been for naught. The document's really going to start to come together, and I hope you all enjoy that. I know I'm getting excited about it. On April 18th, we hosted a public meeting. At that meeting, we began to reveal some of the themes and the goals that we've been talking about. They were very well received. Thank you, Asante. I know on the website for that project, for the Park System Plan Update, if you look on the timeline, you can pull up, or anyone listening in the public can pull up the PowerPoint presentation that was presented that night. Of note, you may recall we've been talking about how to take the concept of the green necklace that sort of lived this little insular life, not included as sort of all the city, and rebrand the green necklace and more of a citywide and beyond vision. We revealed that at the April meeting. We've been sort of beginning to tease it out. I share with all of you the concept that we're beginning to really build that narrative around is creeks to peaks. We really feel like that concept goes beyond green necklace, but when you really think of who we are as a city, the importance of water in this town, the value of the creeks in the valley, up to the Alps and the peaks of the Alps. It's no coincidence that those peaks are outside the borders of the city. And so really trying to create a vision and a narrative that speaks to that inside out concept that we've talked about so much. So more work to be had, but please take a look at that PowerPoint presentation. There's a number of slides that we kind of go into some description of creeks to peaks and why we think there's something there to build a story around. If any of you have any feedback or thoughts on that, please don't hesitate to get a hold of Asante and I, or just be prepared to bring your thoughts on the 30th. But things are really beginning to come together there with the park plan. Projects are cruising. We had a fun joint meeting with the city council and the school board just last Thursday, presented some partnership opportunities, updating our joint use agreement, speaking specifically about athletic fields and the opportunity to do some exciting community sports fields on elementary schools. That was very well received. So I'll stop there. I've been going too long. Lots going on. Thank you, Chris.
Over to me. I sent you all the update of the activities, and they are more and more because the weather's getting nicer, and certainly the farmers market is now a weekly thing. And funny that I start sending those and then we have time in our meetings, but that's fine. We'll stick with it. And then before I finish up, thank you so much to Brad Book. Brad was there when I first joined the Friends of Lake Sammamish board, and I'd never been on any board. I had no idea what to do. And he was one of many that kind of helped me grow this role, and then continued to sort of run point into park board. So special thanks to Brad Book, even though he's not here, it's worth acknowledging. And then Andrew and Zach, thank you for stepping up, especially during tumultuous times of pandemics and things like that. Thank you. Sorry to see you go, both of you. And that's all I have. Any other business announcements?
I have two quick ones. I just wanted to remind everybody that, yes, we will have some new members coming in. Ryan will be transitioning into a regular member position starting next month. Yay. We'll have him for 4 more years. I don't know if you know that. No, I'm kidding. And then we will have 3 new alternate members joining us. starting next month. We'll be doing I'll be doing an orientation with them, and then you'll start seeing them at our next few meetings. And that also means that next meeting, we will also be voting on and nominating for chair and vice chair positions. I want to put this call out to everybody on the board. If you have interest or want to know more or want to throw your name in that hat, please, I encourage it. Let us know. Feel free to reach out to myself and Jeff, and we can talk about that process. But we'll be taking nominations at the next meeting, and I will ask you all to vote on those. So this is another note to everybody to check your schedules and see that this meeting is on your calendars, because it is a different date than our normal meeting. There is this fun little holiday that's happening on our normal Monday, Memorial Day. So the meeting will be that same week, but Thursday, May 30th. So it's a Thursday evening, same time, 7 to 9 p.m. here in Tibbetts, but on May 30th, which is a Thursday. So yeah, that's what I've got for chair and vice chair.
Just want to say thank you so much for the time. It's been a privilege, pleasure, honor being on the board with you all, getting to know you a little bit these past couple of years, and can't believe it's been a couple of years already. So I'm still living downtown in the area. I'm sure we'll run into each other as things go, and very much open to helping out as ad hoc committees or other needs come up. So feel free to reach out if needed. Look forward to seeing all of these great ideas and plans come to fruition.
Okay, anything else? That's it. The meeting is adjourned.
It's all
Thank you.
Minutes.
8:52.
Thank you.